Here we are, the one and only Pete Hardesty. You guys, I'm so excited to have you here, Pete. Thanks for coming on.
Tamra, thanks for having me. How
Oh
fun is
man,
this?
it's awesome. You guys don't know the backstory, but we're about to get into it. Pete and I have known one another, or at least of one another, for I had to do the math on this.
40
Maybe
years, 40 years.
40 years. I
No,
look
no, no.
good. I look really good. Probably like, is it 20 years?
I think
Gosh,
it is.
it would be 20 years. That's
Yeah.
crazy to think about. So
Yep.
20 years since high school. Pete has been a part of the Young Life organization for many, many years. And for those of you who have been following along with the Fit and Faith podcast or my story in any capacity, Young Life is very much ingrained in a part of who I am today on many different levels. And it'll actually be blueprinted in my book that comes out next week. And Pete is also an author himself, actually a multi-author of 2 Amazon #1 bestsellers. And so we'll get into the goods of that. But I'm grateful to continue this friendship and let it evolve for the kingdom. And so thank you for showing up and connecting again.
Who would have thought? Who would have thought all those years back in Virginia Beach? Tamra, it's so fun.
It really is. It's crazy. So I'm going to have to tag all of our Young Life people here so that they can go back and listen to it. I'm thinking
Yes.
some of my faves who you were with what high school or were you with all of Young Life Division at that point as well?
No, in Virginia Beach, I started leading at my first year. I was Cox and Kempsville
Okay.
together. They weren't meeting together, but my life was crazy. I slept in the office sometimes. Not
To
good.
do both.
Yeah, they're far away from each other. They're like 3 minutes away.
It's true.
Then I just did Kempsville for 5 years, and then Princess Anne my last year.
Okay. And then you followed me to JMU.
I did. James Madison University. I mean, what a school. What a
I
great school,
know. It really is. It's really awesome. Now you're up in DC doing the Young College Divisional Coordinator role for the Eastern US, right?
Yes, Young Life can't get rid of me. They've tried. I kind of just keep hanging on, but now I kind of oversee and encourage and support our college work in kind of the East and North Atlantic kind of region.
Really cool. So
Virginia,
that's
Maine,
been
Ohio.
quite the career.
Yeah, 24 years. I mean, it's all I've ever done since college.
Wow.
If I have to leave, I'm going to be like, what would I do?
Yeah, what do I do now? Right. But I think that there's also that element of sharpening and shaping that's transpired, that whatever it be, it'll be something you'll get to rely on all of the tools and talents that you have. You're
Yeah,
plentiful.
hope
So
so. We'll see.
speak to us about kind of the backstory to Pete. Like, how did you even get into Young Life in the first place? Were you always within church or within your faith or belief system?
No, I didn't grow up really going to church. My mom was such an incredible person. She would try to drag us from time to time, maybe on holidays. And but then I got into high school, and I was a fine kid. I wasn't getting into, but just starting to kind of go down a little bit of the party route. And I played soccer, and an older guy on the soccer team asked me to go to Young Life, and I was a freshman. He was a junior, and I was thought I was way too cool for that. And I was like, no, I'm cool. It's good. I didn't even know what it was. And then he said, Tamra, he said words that would forever change my life. He said, it's at Stephanie Selway's house.
Of course.
I mean, she was a junior also. And I knew her. She did not know me. I had this big crush on her. I think we had like bumped into each other in the cafeteria, and I tried to say something. And I think what had come out of my mouth was like, something. And she like looked and then walked off. And so
That's awesome.
I said, it's in her house. We'll go into her house. And he's like, yeah. I said, well, all right. What time are you picking me up? So he picked me up. We went, and I don't remember much about what we did that meeting, but I just remember so many different kids there, the energy, the fun. It felt like everybody belonged. I mean, kids of all sizes were there. And then at the end, this guy who at that time seemed ancient to me, he had to be at least 30 years old, stood up, right? And he opens the Bible and starts reading. And I remember thinking to myself, do you know who these kids are? Like,
Yeah.
they might kill you. I might not leave them, but we don't, you're opening the Bible. It's a weeknight in someone's basement. And I don't remember again what he said, but I do remember thinking, I didn't think Jesus really had anything much to do with my everyday life, but I was wrong. So I was hooked. And so I kind of went to Young Life for a couple more years, but then at a summer camp, that's when I called Lake Champion. That's when God kind of said, okay, it's your time. pluck, you know. And
that is so amazing. So I've gone to Lake Champion as well. So I'm curious, being in the Young Life world for so long, do a lot of people who are now a part of Young Life have a similar story or like touch point from Young Life?
I think so. A lot of the staff were impacted or gave their lives to Christ through Young Life because we know it works. That's the one thing. It's like, well, we know this thing works. Maybe we should be involved in
Yeah,
this.
we're still
Because it
here.
got
Yeah.
me, you know.
Yeah.
One of my mentors, Chuck Reinhold, would always say, "I'm so glad Young Life didn't stop before they got to my high school."
I love
Because,
that.
you know, a lot of we're homegrown fruit. Some of them would say.
Yeah.
And I'm still in touch with my Young Life leader. He still lives in Baltimore. That's where I'm from. Danny O'Brien, and just a tremendous guy who's just walked with me for now. I mean, that was 1991, I think, when I gave my life to Christ. So, Tamra, that's 30 years ago.
That's really
So
crazy.
it's
That's
fun.
really cool. I still have sitting at my right over here my Bible that Wynn Levis gave me
Oh my
when
God.
I spoke at the Young Life dinner, that banquet that you guys have for fundraising and stuff. When
Oh,
I was maybe a sophomore or junior. And so that little thing goes with me on all my vacations, everywhere that I go. And it's definitely been an imprint in my life. And I utilized it as a crutch towards running from God, actually,
mm, mm,
for a season. And even in the season where you and I connected again, when I was going to the JMU Young Life for a little while, getting plugged into the middle school there and trying to help and trying to like just rediscover my identity in Christ. And I say rediscover
mm.
because I was so malleable ninth and 10th grade. I gave my life to Christ in ninth grade through a Young Life person who was like a young youth leader, Luke Barnes. You remember Luke?
Yeah, no, Luke.
Can't forget Luke.
Great.
And then I got really hurt by people, not right, like that church hurt. People get church hurt and then they blame it on God. And I was doing that because I thought that these are the leaders that are supposed to engulf me in this sad season where people found out that I had been sexually immoral, essentially, at a young age, which is not abnormal, especially not abnormal for a lot of the kids that were going to Young Life.
Actually, really normal.
Yeah.
It's not abnormal, right? It's normal.
Right. But
Yeah.
I felt like I was completely ostracized. I felt completely like this isn't normal. And therefore you cannot be a leader and you cannot come and all of these things. And I completely severed ties with my best friends from the last 4 years, 3 months before graduation.
Oh my.
And so it was a really hard time. My parents didn't even know what happened. I was really good at putting on a smile. And so I just leaned into hanging out with the kids who were willing and okay with my ulterior choices. And so going into college, I was just like, I know what is calling me, but I still am hanging out in this other group of people. And so I just teeter-tottered for so long until I had my like one moment, which was not until I was 29. So we were talking offline about this season between adolescence and adulthood and how critical it is for us to have our identity rooted. And I tried, I just couldn't, he didn't have me because I was prodigal. I was making my own choices, right? Flesh was over.
At 29, or what was the, what was that moment? What brought you back? What made it so compelling then?
That was my first full-on Jesus encounter where I had many, what I would call now in the understanding of many Holy Spirit experiences at Young Life and Rockbridge. And I can remember sitting under the stars at Rockbridge when we do the one where you just go out and you're just kind of by yourself, right?
Yeah.
And I remember
20 minutes.
Yeah, like sensing him, but I don't think I was mature enough or willing to let go of the other parts of my testimony that were keeping me engulfed and trapped. And subconsciously, I didn't even know what that was, which I didn't find out until I was 29, going to therapy, figuring out what had been suppressed and what was actually holding grip on me. So when I had that first encounter where I can close my eyes and I'll never forget exactly where I was, exactly what God himself said to me, all of those emotions, right? And that's really where Fit in Faith and this podcast and all of that emerged, was from that moment and that transition and final surrender.
Oh man, that is awesome. I'm so glad. I mean, I think it's wherever you are in life, it's never too late.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people maybe were involved with Jesus or Young Life or a church or something in high school, college, something, and then they've kind of either on purpose drifted, by mistake drifted, or wherever. And it's never that was a little bit of my story too. My freshman year of college, especially, was a time of running towards not away from God.
Yeah.
And then you just think, well, I've run far enough that I must be, I
Yeah,
must be
I'm
run.
good.
Yeah, exactly. Like I can't get back. I can't run all the way back. And so,
Yeah.
but the weird part is he's right behind you. It doesn't matter how far away you
So
run, right?
true.
Like he is literally there, and he's never. I don't think, Tamra, I don't think ever that Jesus is ever like this.
Mhm.
Ever. I don't think he's ever wagging, or God like has his
Yeah,
arms folded.
crossed.
Can't get him up into the screen, but or, my arm, his arms folded, just like looking. I don't see that, and so whenever I feel that, I have to remind myself that's not from God. That's not Jesus.
Good.
There is no condemnation, right?
Mhm.
It doesn't say like there's not much. When you do the really bad, it's like, okay, and then get a little of that condemnation.
Yeah.
There is no. I'm pretty sure it says no. Like,
No, yeah.
so it's. But the weird part is, if we drift or you do a couple things that maybe you feel like, I mean, are wrong. Most people, instead of running back to God, like I would run away from it, or just think I'm not going back to church. Like that's not, or I'm not going back to Young Life or whatever. And that's actually what we need to do. But I'm
Yeah,
still gonna do it.
1,000%. And I think that's where one of my root passions and driving forces are to help obliterate shame. And
Mm,
shame is an enemy tactic, right? And we stay blanketed in it, but it's a self-induced experience. It's an
mm,
enemy-induced experience. It has nothing to do with God. God
yeah,
never would want us feeling that way. It's the whole reason he sent Jesus to the cross. And
right.
so
Right.
it's just the understanding of what that is and how do you break free from it.
Mm, that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think to speak into kind of the ministry side of what you've been doing and kind of your life's purpose as well is talk to us how this evolution of your books has transpired, because I think that they are so ingrained with the ultimate mission that you're on.
Yeah. So I moved to Harrisonburg, Virginia, where James Madison is, in 2004 from Virginia Beach, and it was a very steep learning curve for my job. I went from, most of our Young Life leaders in Virginia Beach are career folks or maybe a couple college students, but flip that to James Madison where they're all in college. And, I got to, what a fun season of life. I lived there for 13 years. But the longer I was there, I realized that, I mean, and JMU kids are just the best. They're energetic, they're so bright, they're involved. It's like there's a culture at JMU that people hold the doors for people, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to get to the bottom of it. I have some, like, how did this start? Who did this? What was, Dr. Mark Warner, and
Oh,
now
he's
Nick
the
Langford.
best. I love him
Yeah,
so
like,
much.
and I think it's just been some men and women who have helped kind of make that a special place. But I realized that most of the leaders that were graduating and going into the real world, either moving to Richmond or DC or Virginia Beach or somewhere, and going into the marketplace, really struggled. Like really struggled. Really great kids, really sharp kids, really, for the most part, healthy kids, and really, really struggled. And I thought something is wrong here. There's a disconnect, right? Like, and looking a little deeper, it seemed like a lot of people did. That was like the year that, you think about those transition years. If you go into college, you graduate high school and then go to college, that's a very important tradition. But then there's one that, when you go into the real world, it's like, for most people, college is a positive experience. You're living with some of your dearest friends, or you might be living in a big house with guys or girls, or by the time you're a senior, and then you make this jump, and so much stuff changes. You probably don't find 10 people to live with your same age that you've loved, and
Yeah,
like,
not so much.
you're finding on the internet, you're on a bulletin, the old bulletin boards or wherever, trying to figure out roommates and moving situations and money and rent and on and on. And so we thought school is great, but it just doesn't prepare us for the real world like it should. And so, uh, like, I realized that because one time I was teaching um, the Young Life leaders to write thank you notes. I think thank you notes, handwritten thank you notes, are gold in this age of flying by every digital text, everything. You get a handwritten note. Everybody I've talked to says, you know what you do with them? You read them, you reread them, and then you read them again. And if I get a nice email, I might do that once, but I even have a drawer where I put all my thank you notes, and I have. And when I'm feeling bad, sometimes you might pull out one. You know
I
what? It's
love
something
that.
good here and there.
Yeah, I love that.
Actually, there was a guy, one of my guys, Bryson. I always did a small group of every grade, but his senior at JMU, and he was living in this huge, the old Sigma Chi house. Actually, the landlord was like, I actually like Sigma Chi. I almost pledged it, but not JMU. But he said, hey, they've been there 20 years, and I'm done. We're gonna rent the house. He's like, would Young Life want it? I'm like, yes. So we have there's like 21 guys in this house right off the quad.
Nice.
And so he's living in there. One of his roommates comes, the parents come in town, take him out to real nice dinner downtown. And he writes him a thank you note, a handwritten thank you. And then this guy, the guy who took him out to eat, his roommate, the dad says, hey, we're going to go to like Jackson Hole or somewhere snowboarding for spring break. You can bring a friend, but it needs to be Bryson.
That's the only choice.
Yeah, guys are like, well, I mean, he's one of my best friends. Sure, like, Bryson's a good snowboarder. Why him? He goes, he wrote me a thank you note for dinner in the fall. And
That's
Bryson told me the story,
awesome.
and I was like, well, that's the moral of the story. If you write thank you notes, you get free trips to Jackson Hole or maybe a Steamboat Springs or something of snowboarding trips, you know?
I love that. That's so good. They are special.
They are special, right? So we're teaching, Young Life leaders to write thank yous, and we're going to actually write 2 thank you notes to 2 people they wanted to thank, right? I brought cards, I brought stationery, brought stamps, everything. They write them. This guy comes up. I mean, this is a smart kid, junior, named Chris. Chris goes, hey man, which side? Like, what's the to and from? Where's this go?
Oh no.
And I laugh. I'm like, no man, just put them on. You can put the stamp on. I think he's totally kidding. He's not kidding. And I thought, man, that's something he probably should know by now. He's 21, So, and I have like 10 or 15 stories like that. So we just
I mean, because to and from is an email, and it says to, and then it says from, and you type in the thing, and that's it.
You can't mess that up, right? You can't mess
that's
it up. No, it's so true. So we and so I just realized that, but I didn't do anything about it. One of the guys who's actually from Chesapeake, named Josh Burnett, he graduated. His dad owns the ChickfilA at Lynn Haven and at Salem Crossing.
Okay, nice.
Oh yeah, Brian Burnett. I mean, great family. And Josh got a ChickfilA fresh out of college. He's running one in Arkansas. He calls me like 3 or 4 years when he's out of college. And I started doing this senior prep course. I was like, I'm going to try to give it my best shot to give all my graduating seniors as much as I know about finances, professionalism, time management, how to treat your boss, how to treat your coworkers, on and on, all the different stuff.
I love this. This is all under the salary of Young Life, outside of your actual job, though, right?
Yeah. I mean, the senior prep course kind of was Young Life training, but they could have been friends.
I love it.
We made it to Martin's. I'd take them grocery shopping, teach them about unit price.
So great.
And basically, it was like, hey, learn from some of my mistakes. If I can give you some stuff, I've made some costly mistakes that almost derailed my life. In fact, I wanted that to be the title of the first book, but the publisher didn't love that title.
I love it, but I like adulting a lot.
Yeah. And so, so he went through that, and I would give a packet of like 15 or 20 pages of just wisdom that I've learned from the great men and women that I've sat under, just gotten to know. And so 3 or 4 years after college, he calls me and says, Pete, I sold all my textbooks back the last day. I haven't cracked one of those. I haven't looked at them, but I've looked at your packet all the time. In fact, I usually pick a thing and I run my team. He has about 100 employees. I think that's average for Chick-fil-A. He said, I take my team through like one little point every week. And a lot of them weren't spiritual or Christian, but all truth is God's truth. And so he said, they really loved it. So I shared it with the Arkansas group of Chick-fil-A operators. I guess they get together. They loved it. Some of them took their teams through it. They loved it. They came back to him and said, you should publish this. And he's like, well, he had added some to it about business, but he came back to me and said, hey, this is 80 or 90% your stuff. Would you want to write a book about this? And I said, honestly, I don't even need to pray about it. I think so. Yes. So then we kind of collaborated and tried to crank it out. Took it around to 20 or 25 publishers. A bunch of them said no. And then we finally found one that was like, yeah, I guess so. I mean, they weren't super
like, we'll do it.
Yeah, well, I mean, like reluctantly, and that was kind of the genesis of the book.
That is really incredible. And I think now being in like the throes of the whole publishing piece, like that's a whole thing in and of itself. And I feel like it's been curated similar to a lot of other systems I could name, but I won't at this moment. I'll let your imagination run wild of the knowing of like, it's eliminating what can be possible and what is initially a God deposit. It's inhibiting people. And they're saying, oh, there's the publisher won't publish it, so my idea isn't good, or it's not worthy of being published. And that's why I love podcasting so much, is because anybody can press play. Anybody can do that part. It does take, a little bit of tech and stuff like that, but no different than a book. And so making way for more Christian books and authors to make way for these kinds of conversations, because that is critical and crucial. Like 4 years later, to still be utilizing that information as you're sharing it, I'm like, shoot, this would be an amazing high school gift to give high schoolers right before they go into college. Because I can think of one of my girlfriend's daughters right now is like, she's going to the grocery store for the first time. She's going to the doctor's office for the first time. She's doing things she's never, ever had to do. Checks and balances. That's not a thing they teach.
Right.
And I'm 34 and I could still use some of that information.
And, I'm still learning myself. And, we wrote it from a point of like, we haven't all this figured out, but we're trying to figure out some of it. And, like really great parents, it just, a lot of times it just doesn't occur. They try to set their child up to kind of make it, but a lot of this practical stuff, I mean, I can't tell you how many parents have not had conversations about money with their children.
Yeah.
Good parents, like really good. And so you're right in the middle of it. You have a book that comes out next week.
I do.
And tell us the title.
Yeah, it's called Always Becoming Sex, Shame, and Love.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Always becoming sex, shame, and love.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about timely, Tamra. Oh my God. That's going to be, I cannot wait to read it.
Thank you. I'm so excited about it. But I think as you're talking through this change, this time frame of going from college into life, I was processing my emotions of where I was. I could put my feet in the sand, right where I was, literally. And the emotions that were swirling were actually very similar than the same emotions that swirled from high school to college. Is this isolation experience that happens, this shift in placement on who am I happened all over again, because now I am in an entire other environment. I was in my hometown, so not a new city, but a lot of people are in a new city. They become the smallest fish in this massive pond, and they're treading water. Like, I just have to keep swimming, like Dory said in Nemo, and eventually I'll get somewhere, but there's no direction. We're all told from a very young age, at least my generation was. My kiddos, I feel like, are a bit different because of the ideology that our generation has shifted to, but it's this understanding. We were told it's high school, and then it's college, and then it's a job.
Yep.
And that's not how I'm parenting, because I don't necessarily think that the 4 years of partying did me total justice, but I do know that my degree served me well. So,
right.
I just think when you're thinking through, my whole point in sharing this is like, there's so many conversations swirling through the heads of people and children and also adults when they shift to any new environment. And isolation, I think, is a huge piece to that. How does your book serve, or how do you share in that realm at this point in your career?
Yeah, that's you nailed it right on the head. It's so much stuff shifts at once that it can be so disorienting. And honestly, I think social media has such great purposes, but this is one of those shadow sides of social media. Because you know how many people I knew, Tamra, what was going on with them when I graduated in 1997?
Yeah, probably nothing.
Like 4.
Yeah.
People I called.
If you called, exactly.
I could call them and see now, and we actually go through this in the second book. The first book is more hard skills, professionalism, 3 or 4 chapters on finances. And we do have an appendix, so it's appropriate for graduating high school or college, of how to crush college.
Cool.
So I interviewed people with 100 years of working with college students combined.
Cool.
And said, what have you seen? What have been the recipes for students, successful students? And I just list them. And so but the second book, I'm much more excited about. We had our second book come out in April, and it's much more about adulting on the inside, growing up on the inside, figuring out, self-awareness and how to lead yourself and emotional intelligence. And we have 2 or 3 chapters on social media. And then the whole last second half of the book is about mental health. And we had 5 counselors, also with 100 years of combined experience working with young people, and just had them speak into. We have 2 chapters each on anxiety, loneliness, and depression. But I think honestly that social media. I mean, imagine, let's say Instagram is my favorite platform. What's yours? What's your
Yeah, I
favorite?
like Instagram, and Clubhouse has newly emerged, but
Yeah,
Instagram.
yeah. Okay, that's my favorite one. You guys might have it. There might your listeners might have a different. But let's say I follow 730 people. I follow them. I follow many more than that. I follow like 4 times that. But let's just say it's 730. Tamara, that means that every day of the year, 2 of the people I follow are having the best day of their entire year. So, and I don't know what about you, but I post a lot more when things are really fun and going well.
Yeah, of course,
I don't post like, "Hey, I'm home again, alone on a Saturday night.
Yeah.
This is fun." Man, I'm really lonely. Like,
So at this stage in my life, I actually yearn for that. So
yes, yes, yeah, that actually would be a post. It's like, finally, my feet are up and I'm drinking a glass of wine. Yes.
And I'm by myself.
Yeah, exactly. So, but whatever, I should post more than that. And a couple times that I've been really half joking, but self denigrating posts are the other my most liked posts.
100%. Because they're relatable. They're the most relatable because that's actually how people are feeling versus seeing you out on your boat.
Right. Exactly. So the two people, if you follow 730 people, 2 people are having the best day of their year every day of your life, and you get a front row seat to it. More than that, 61 people are having the best day of their entire month, one of the best 12 days of their year. So that means 63 people every day. Every day so no wonder I don't feel great after I look at Instagram. I look at Instagram, I'm like, my life is terrible. Because if you're having one of the best 12 days of your year, best day of your month, you post more about that too, usually 2 or 3 times. So that means, and most people follow more than 700 people. That's just the reason 730.
No, it's perfect. It's easy for the math. I got it.
Okay, I
got you.
Yeah. And so I think that's one of the reasons that, and it might be the contributing reason of being able to look around and see you. And everybody has a couple friends that everything seemed to fall into place. But we know that because of social media. And guess what? Because of the curation, it's probably not like that. They're not. They're so. But we're comparing ourselves with other people's highlight reels of their entire life instead of the game film, instead of the day-to-day nitty-gritty. And I didn't have to wrestle with that because I just knew 4 of my friends. 2 of them were fine. 2 of them were having a hard time. I'm like, well, I'm kind of in the middle.
Can we go back to that? Can we go back to that?
Yeah, I know.
That would make my business so much better.
Right. Exactly. Right. So I think, but social media, for all its that's one of the big things is, I would bet a lot of your listeners in their 20s, maybe into their 30s, but like you have I bet you got a young hip because you're so cool. And
oh, I hope so. I doubt that. I'm like mid 30s to mid 40s actually.
Oh, really? Is that
okay?
Well,
yeah.
People will guess you're like 25 and just,
I'll take the energy.
Yeah. And so I think even for 30s to 40s, figuring out our relationship with social media is one of the most important things we have to do because it is engineered to be addictive. You guys, most of us have watched The Social Dilemma. We know it. But even I read an article last week that said Facebook knows that it and itself, it owns Instagram. It knows that this is toxic to people, and it's still just shoveling it at us. It's engineered to be, the executives of these 2 companies and most of social media companies don't allow their kids to use it because they're like, oh, this is terrible.
Right. Yeah, they're completely open about that too. And to speak to some listeners we have live who are saying a few of us old folks are in their 50s. I love you. Thank you for being outside of my target audience, but inside of my heart.
Right.
So important. But I think what I think as the explanation to that is a yearning. Like we all want to have that lifestyle. We all are looking to have that highlight reel experience. And so then we forget to live in the present moment of our actual life. And then it creates a longevity. It creates a distance between us actually having that day and us experiencing the current day that we're having. So there's a gap between what we're seeing and what we're feeling. And then the feeling becomes suppression, which is then depression, anxiety, isolation. And so now you're stuck further away from the highlight reel that you could have, that God has already promised you to experience literally in that moment. But
Yep.
it's this constant touch points. I'm actually in the middle of a 67-day challenge right now. And a part of it is the 5 practices for morning routine. The first one is don't hit the snooze button. But the second one is don't touch your phone before you do your gratitude and goals, written gratitude and goals, move your body and send a word of encouragement to someone. And not touching your phone, it is incredible how addicted we are. It's an addiction.
My phone calls to me. It beckons.
Yeah, it does. I'm like, what's happening?
2 minutes. Just make sure. It could be an emergency. You could be someone could be hurt. Guess what? No one's ever been hurt.
Never.
Ever in my life.
No.
If they're hurt, they don't call me. I don't know why.
I actually remember, Pete, when I transitioned, when I first had kiddos, I transitioned to having my phone on do not disturb at night because I needed sleep, right? And my family was actually so offended. They were like, what happens if something's wrong with me? Like, call Gary. I don't know. I'm sleeping.
Or call twice and I'll put you in the little, call twice back. If you call twice at 3 a.m., my parents. Yeah.
Never, not one time has there ever been a need that I needed to pick up my phone, even when my siblings were pregnant themselves and I wanted to be at the hospital. It never happened. And so I just think we're so used to the access point to everyone that we expect there to be, you need to be on social media. If you haven't liked my like today, where are you? Are you even my follower? Are you even my fan?
Right.
My podcast?
What did I do? Did I do something to offend you? Are we mad? Are we okay? Yeah.
Get okay. I think the end point of this is to get okay with self, which is that whole mental health understanding. Understand your emotions, understand your EQ, your IQ. That's the college years. But EQ is that season between you get out of college and you get to, hopefully, eventually, whether in a relationship, in your job, your ideal situation, the place that you want to be, there's this huge gap that should be identity experience. And I didn't even know what identity meant when I was in my 20s. Nobody talked to me about identity.
Right. Can I highlight 2 things you said?
Yes.
I don't want people to miss them. Because I also share 5 years ago my morning routine. I had a morning routine. I'd get up, have my quiet time. I'm not a huge coffee person. I'd make some tea. I'd read a little bit, but I didn't have. And then I read a book called A Miracle Morning by Hal Elrod, which is like he's on the all name team, right? That's the best name maybe. And I'm not saying you would need to adopt his suggestions, but what is your ideal morning routine? I had never thought about it, and I was 40, Tamra. But so then I get it, and then if I get it 3 or 4 times a week, guess what? That's better than 0.
Yeah, 100%.
I don't know that I've ever gotten it 7 times, but I've gotten 5 or 6. So I think that's so important to craft your ideal morning routine, dream about it, and then fix it a little bit, tweak it. But it should, and then. It's good once you get it, you can elongate it out to 2 or 3 hours if you have a morning like that, but then you can also make it 10 minutes if you need to, but that'll change. I think morning routine will determine who you are in 5 years. I know a lot of people say, well, the books you read and the people you hang out with, those are important too, but I think morning routine, because it's that time when you don't have the phone, it should be. When you don't have the phone, you don't, so.
Yeah, no, you're so right. I think that I've never heard it said in that phraseology that your morning routine will determine who you will be in 5 years, but you're so right, because ultimately that's like the most precious time of my day. Not to say time with my spouse or my kiddos isn't very precious, but if I don't have that, I am way out of alignment to what I know and how I know I can show up as the best version of myself during that day. If I don't have those specific things, and mine's different than what I just mentioned, but that's the challenge that I'm in. I have to, before I put my feet on the ground, pray. I have to send my gratitude. Just the fact that I'm breathing and I'm awake before the sun, I'm always grateful. And so practicing that gratitude, and then for this challenge, writing it down has actually been harder than I imagined it to be. Mainly because when I'm praying, there is no formality. There's no formality to the language. Like, God knows my heart. Even if I can't curate what the sentence is, he sees me. He knows me. We're having a conversation. Versus writing it has an air of perfectionism that I don't really love. So I'm trying to figure that out. I need some stream of conscious gratitude, right? I change the way that this book is laying it out for me. But you're so right. And I think that if people leaned into that, and it could be for some people a nighttime routine, but I really believe it's the start of the day that then dictates the rest of your day.
I think you're right. Both are important. I still haven't fit my evening routine. I can't speak about it because I'm still
not yet.
I'm still working on it. Yeah. But my morning routine, just trying to give it, and you know what? If you don't get it one morning, guess what? God willing, you got another morning coming up the next day. So it's
right.
We always have a time to improve, try to do it again. See, and then, but you also mentioned how important our identity is, and I think figuring out our identity and having it be based in Christ is so that like the last couple of chapters we write both these books. They don't have any mention of God, Jesus, the Bible until the last chapter in both the books on purpose. I mean, there's definitely some God's truth in there, especially when we talk about relationships or money or whatever. But this last one of the truths that was like the anchor of the last chapter is your identity is received, not achieved. And the world will tell you to achieve it. The world will tell you to, press on, do a little better, but the actual reality is every single human being has God's fingerprint on their heart, the divine spark already inside of them, that our identity is received. And then it's more of a discovery. It's more like an adventure to find out how you're wired and what gifts has God given you and what allows you to come alive and the freedom that I bet, I cannot wait to read your book. I bet you mentioned even some of that. There's some of that discovery, and we're not very good at it. We're not very good at allowing our identity to be received. If that is true, then all these things come from that. The inherent worth of every human being on earth, no matter their physical, mental, emotional abilities.
And I think it's because we live in a hustle culture, right? And that's a part of what I speak to my book. Like we're constantly driven to keep going. Just keep swimming is because we don't want to see you stop. And if you stop, what could happen? Right. Yeah. Go higher, go faster, go longer, go wider. Like we are not all on a football team. We don't play D1, y'all. Like not everybody's even in shape. Get with the program. Is the understanding that like we have to understand that the doing and the being are not the same to God. Right. It's not by our works that he loves us, just like the recipient of his love is not by what we've done, but by what he did for us. And so then we don't have to activate anything other than breath, other than purpose, which is a kingdom thing. And purpose looks very different than an accolade to me.
Yeah. Yeah. And grace is not like this is not against hard work. I'm a big believer.
Oh, 1,000%.
I know you are too.
Yeah. I move all day, y'all. I do. But I am being in my doing, but I had a switch in that.
Yeah. Grace is not opposed to effort, but only to earning favor, earning love, earning God's, approval, that stamp of approval. That grace stands in defiance to that, but not to hard work. I mean, not to effort. We in fact, it even tells us, work out our salvation, work out our saving grace with fear and trembling. So work it out. Let's, hard work is lifted up, but we're not trying to achieve God's approval. We already have it. So then we get to operate it. Like our obedience is because of his approval and his favor. We already have it. Nothing, and we can't do anything. We can't do anything to make God love us anymore, and we can't do anything to make him love us any less.
It brings me back full circle to what you said at the beginning. No matter how far away we run, when we turn around, he's right behind us. It makes me literally think of that visual where you're like going to do something, you're like, oh, you're right there. Oh, you're right there. Why are you right there? Right? Like that was creepy. Like we ask people to follow us, but like that's kind of creepy, right? And so he's right there. And as much as he says to follow me, he's following us. He's recklessly pursuing us every part and to teach us over and over and affirm us over and over again, not just based on his word, which is a massive component to that, but based on the people he even puts into our circles and our spheres. And so he's utilizing all of us as vessels for one another to keep his church in a healthy experience here on earth as it is in heaven. But so often because of flesh, because of the enemy, we have a natural divide that occurs. And so I think when you understand your identity, that tendency towards competition starts to diminish, and we get to start looking through the lens of community and communion, right?
Yeah. One of the diagnostics you mentioned is, can I really celebrate when something good happens to someone else, especially someone like, if I can't, there's something inside of me but when you have that freedom, when, I heard a podcast a couple of weeks ago, and the person in there, she said, I'm trying to live in a place where I arrive to where I have nothing to prove, nothing to lose, and nothing to hide. Nothing to prove, nothing to lose, and nothing to hide. And I thought, that's what I want to, that's where I want to, land. And I'm still I'm still working towards it, at it, but nothing to prove, because our identity is secure in Jesus. Nothing to lose when we know, you know what? Like, we only get one go round here. And guess what? Everybody gives away the same amount of money when they die.
Yeah, exactly.
All of it.
Yeah, every single penny.
One of my mentors in Virginia Beach would always ask me, Pete, you ever seen a hearse pulling a U-Haul? No, Jack, I still haven't seen that.
Yeah.
Of course you haven't, because naked you come and naked you go.
That's the best.
You better figure out what matters in this life and give yourself to it. I'm like, all right, Jack.
Oh my goodness, I love it.
It's so true, right?
It is.
So, nothing to lose, and then nothing to hide. Are we living just out in the open, transparent, in community? So that's I love what you said.
Yeah. And I think that's likely the component of, in those, I was calling them the wandering years. In those years, we're actually doing the antithesis of every single one. We're trying to prove ourselves. We're trying to prove to our parents. We're trying to prove to ourselves that we can survive on our own, right? Like, I'm a big girl. I'm a big boy. I can make my bills. I don't have to ask mommy and daddy for money. I don't have to move back into their apartment.
Right,
I'm just as good as the other person who's working on Wall Street already, who also is isolated, but acts like they have a lot of money, but they're really just in credit card debt. Like, there's all this stuff.
Right.
You're trying to prove. We're trying, what was the other one? Nothing to lose. Everything's to loss at that point. You feel like you are clinching at the claws just to keep the one thing, whatever that one thing is. 100% hoarding. You're hoarding.
Yeah.
Right. That's what the hoarding years. That's what we're going to call it. Right. And then the last part is that hiding. I mean, I feel like my mask was like the mask. It was so impaled on my face that I didn't know the difference between this version of self and this version of self. So I just stayed in the fun version of self, which everybody loved and invited to the parties and needed me to be there, right? They needed me. And I was actually depleting myself in the giving and the giving and the giving, trying to prove that I was something that I actually wasn't at all. So
it was the false you.
Yeah.
Not the fun part. The fun part is the real you.
Yeah, it's true.
It was a false iteration, and we all have those, right? We've almost learned how to operate with something that's false and not us, because it's just been easier, or we got accolades for it, like you said. And so I think that's part of the journey we're on, as far as self-awareness and self-discovery and learning who we are. It's funny, 90, we have the stat in the book, 92% of people think they're self-aware, and psychologists would say 10 to 15% actually are.
Yeah.
So 80% of us are lying to ourselves every day, thinking.
Well, and that's the exact word I was thinking as you're saying. The hiding is really just a bunch of little white lies that have compounded to a belief system that is a lie, but you think is true, because little white lies are harmless. And you don't remember all the little white lies that you'd say, because you're usually saying them out of generosity, to not hurt someone, not make somebody feel isolated, not make somebody feel bad, or not make yourself feel bad towards the truth of something. But eventually you're so plagued by this massive lie that is, I am not worthy. I am not called. I am not capable. These are huge things that I deal with. 50-year-old women coming to me on the regular telling me, this is what I believe about myself. It just makes me want to cry. And that's why I'm glad I had a quarter life crisis versus a midlife crisis.
Yeah.
But it still sucked. It still isn't fun.
Right. It's never too late, right? To kind of try to figure ourselves out and start believing the truth.
Yeah.
Because if we really believe what Jesus said, the truth will set us free. I mean, And so anytime we feel like we're bound up, usually, not every time, but usually I'm believing a lie, because lies bind up and they wring you out and they press you down, whereas the truth really does set us free. Even if it's a hard truth, it still sets us free. There's something in our heart that kind of leaps towards it.
Yeah, I 1,000% agree. And I think relationally, that's where we're broken, right? We're not willing to have that iron sharpening iron. We say it and we think, oh, we'll get close enough. But then when it actually hurts, you run, you flee from that situation. But really, like iron sharpening iron is not a soft experience. There has to be
Right.
truth and there has to be a little bit of piercing in order for that to really be healed to the scar that I believe God wants us to have, to be able to live out of that knowing and that truth. And
Mm,
so I think if we relationally were able to be honest enough to not hide, to not prove against one another, and to not feel like we're going to lose something if we're honest,
mm.
I think that we could have a better, secure relational foundation, which would be really pleasing and honoring to God.
Oh, that's so great. That's so well said. It's so true.
Pete, so we have a couple more minutes and I want to ask you a final question because we talked about it at the beginning. What's next? Like what further vision? How do you see yourself saying yes to God in the next couple of years?
Mm. I think when I make 5-year plans, I think God just like laughs
Every
because
time.
yeah, I think He likes it. It's not like I don't think it's a condescending laugh. I think it's like oh, like where you love something and you're like, look at this guy. That's great. Like
Yeah.
almost like a come here, give me a bigger
Yeah, let
hug.
me give you a hug. That's cute.
Yeah,
I'll pat you on the head.
yeah, exactly. But proud that yeah, she's trying.
Yeah.
So, I still feel called to young life. I still think it's especially now the timing of. I was at Rockbridge. We have a camp, in Virginia called Rockbridge near Washington and Lee and Goshen, and I was there. About 450 college students were there this weekend, and we wore masks inside for the most part, and tried to really. But it was a blast. It felt. But I went to a meeting for one of the schools, and they gave a little space for students to maybe say, speak for 5 or 10 seconds about something they learned or something they're taking home. And it felt like every student started with, well, this has been the hardest season of my life. Well, some of you guys know I've been dealing with some personal problems, some challenges. I mean, 15, 20 students shared in every single one. So I think for this next season, it's how can we help people to get healthy on the inside, including myself. And so, because I think no matter what's happened, the pandemic has been hard for most people. And especially those who've been in school, had their kind of life, their certain years of school changed, and it's the uncertainty and mental health was fragile before the pandemic. So I'd like to kind of help. I hope that, this our first book took a little bit to get going, a little bit to get traction, and it wasn't really until its second or third year that it really kind of took off. And we're hoping that this, the Green Book which is book 2, all about mental health, that it really helps some young people maybe be a bridge to therapy, to counseling. I've been in counseling 2 times for extended periods of time in my life, and might be ready for a third. We'll see,
Yeah.
sometime soon.
Always.
No,
Always.
yeah, no, exactly. I'm always ready for it. But I think it's still young life. But I also love I've through the books, I've gotten a chance to go to some college campuses, to go to some churches and speak and maybe be with people, to maybe run a retreat or something. And I love that. I love being in person with young people and maybe talking about how to wildly succeed in life in spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally. And so I'm hoping to be able to do a little more of that. But
I love
honestly, I'm
that.
just hoping to ask Jesus, hey, what do you want? What's today bring? And what do I have to do? What do I have to do for my job? I'm not quitting yet, but what's today bring? What's tomorrow bring? What do you want me to do in this next 5 minutes, this next hour, this next day? Um,
Yeah.
so I know that's not a really specific answer.
No, I love it. No, I think it's amazing. And God knows the hearts and the needs of the youth, right? And it's not just the youth. I think adults as a whole, that this conversation of mental health is spiraling with purpose and opportunity. And there needs to be people who are rooted in order to enter into those areas and not only shine like the light of Jesus, but also understand with empathy, right? And I think that's the biggest thing. And why I'm grateful for the struggles and the trials and tribulations that I've walked through is because I have empathy that I would have never had before. And so I think as people are unlocked, their empathetic eye towards those to follow, no matter age, as that part doesn't matter, or ethnicity, that it's more just they get empathy. And I think that's why when you see Jesus love the way that he did, there was no boundaries to that love, right? He just loved as is. And I think your work is going to allow people to do that.
Thank you. We really hope it does. We do hope that for whatever reason, there's still a lot of people that, won't. And I was one of those. Actually, I don't know whether I told you this, but we had 7 staff in Virginia Beach, and we're at a staff meeting one time, and one of the female staff had a bit of courage and shared with the group that she was in counseling. And then someone else was like, actually, I just started a couple weeks ago. We went around, Tamra. All 7 of us were in counseling at once, but we didn't tell anyone. I mean, we were tight with the staff, but we were so either embarrassed, shame, whatever the term is, we didn't tell each other. It took someone to kind of crack that door open, and then we all went in. And there's nothing to be ashamed of for that. And it's like people that are professionally trained to help us learn how to think and deal with stuff that maybe we went through and all that. It's like, so I'm hoping also that the book, our second book, can maybe chip away a little bit of the stigma of that as well. So
love that. Likewise, my book has a whole chapter called Trainers Need Trainers. And it's the fact that we're willing as a society to hire someone to fix every single thing about us, our cars, our houses. We'll do it now. I mean, our AC is broken. Right. My husband does HVAC. It's like a need right now. Yesterday, it needed to be fixed.
Right.
And when it comes to our mental stability, we wait and we wait and we wait until we're so broken that putting us back together is a long duration of time when it could just be a tiny wire fix.
And we're embarrassed to go to a brain mechanic for whatever reason.
1,000%.
I am. I say we. I was and still am even a little bit.
Oh, I was completely. I was sitting on that couch. I was just like, seriously, this is such a joke. And I lied my way through the first couple sessions. Not joking. I lied my way through, and they were rooting me on. Like giving me affirmation because I was giving them crap to work with, and I was leaving empowered. My husband's like, I think you need to try someone else. I don't think that's right.
Yeah.
She said, right? Now I have power behind my punch. And he's like, no, I don't think that's true. So I think if people understood that it's just another coach, and everyone's a coach now, and everyone's willing to pay for a coach and their trainer and a personal trainer and all the things, teachers. That's where really insert therapists should be in the wandering years, right? That's when
could be the most important coach we ever have.
Oh,
I mean,
hands down for my life.
Yeah.
Hands down. Pete, it's been such a joy having you on the show. I love you so much. I'm so excited for your ministry. I'm grateful to have been blessed by your ministry and energy. And I know honestly, I still want to say that it's just the beginning.
Tamra, thanks so much. Love you lots too. It's so fun to see what God's done in and through your life. I mean, and we're just getting started. You're just getting started.
I agree. All the above. The above. You guys, make sure you hang out with Pete. He said Instagram is his favorite place to be. Go get his book, Adulting, the book number 1, or book number 2, Adulting 101. You can get it on Amazon and all the best places. You can also go to PeteHardesty.com. Links are below. And I hope you guys enjoy and see his speaker reel because it's really powerful. So if you have any contacts to get him into speaking with young adults, I think that this is definitely an opportunity to touch base and have somebody incredible come and impact your youth. We love you. Thanks for listening.